Hello everybody, I'm Jean-Baptiste Moggio, I'm Head of Marketing at RTL AdConnect, and it's a great pleasure for me to virtually attend this advertising week in New York for the second year in a row. I hope in 2022 I'll have the pleasure to be really with you in New York in person, but for the moment it's a real pleasure to be with you virtually. And today I'm going to introduce one of our major research papers from 2021, which is called The Responsible Brands in Europe. But first of all, a quick word about us. We are part of the RTL group. We are actually representing all the properties of the group, so mainly linear TV. We have like 12 leading television groups across Europe, but we are also representing all the online video properties of the RTL group, including great local and global OTT platforms and own content professionally produced on YouTube. But let's go back to sustainability and responsible brands, because our job at RTL AdConnect is to approach international advertisers to help them shape their international advertiser strategy with very good insights that deep dive into the consumer behavior country by country. And as sustainability and responsibility is a growing matter in marketing, we had to address the consumer behavior regarding sustainability in Europe. That's why we came up during the course of the year with this very one-of-a-kind quantitative survey about responsible brands. We interviewed 1,000 people in Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and Italy to take a deep dive into consumer attitudes and expectations towards sustainability in the media and also toward brands. So let's start away with the first part of our research. And we started to think about what's our role, what's the media owner role in sustainability awareness, because our role as a media is of course to depict the cultural state of the country we are in. And as the country is increasingly aware of sustainability, we have to tackle the topic in the media. So we asked a very simple question to our consumers in the beginning. How aware and how preoccupied are you by the climate change and the current environmental situation? And in Europe, you can see that a vast majority of the consumers are aware of the current situation regarding the environment. It's 71% of respondents that acknowledge that we are in a major crisis at the moment. But our role with the survey was to dig a bit deeper. And so we checked the awareness of, let's say, more precise topic in the sustainability matter. The first one was carbon footprint. And here, first surprise, there are 17% of European respondents that never heard of carbon footprint. And out of this 17%, it was a majority of older people, so more than 55 years old, while the younger ones were more aware about the carbon footprint. Second topic we explored was digital pollution. How is the internet contributing to global warming? And it's more than 1/3, 36% of all our respondents that never heard about digital pollution. And again, this is the topic was more common to the younger ones than to the older ones. One thing all the target groups have in common, however, is the fact that they really want more content about sustainability, climate change, environment in the media, to inform them, of course, but also to tell them how to deal with it, to educate them and to give them tips on how to deal with climate change and behave more sustainably. And when we think about media and about television content, our role is obviously to inform the largest audience possible in the more convenient, understandable way. So what we are doing with sustainability and climate change is to use our traditional formats and adapt them to the situation to push the maximum information to the widest audience. Let's check with the first example. ITV, the leading UK broadcaster, used the weather forecast to alarm its audience about global warming. Let's have a look.
Our climate is changing. Rising temperatures and extreme weather events around the world are putting animal and human lives at risk. And in May last year, the UK Parliament declared a national climate emergency. But what does that mean? What is the emergency? For that, we need to understand the basics. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, here is Earth. It holds everything we've ever known, every animal, every plant, every human being. And it is actually very fragile. For a perfect world, we need everything to be in balance. And the world gets all of its energy from the sun. That heats the Earth up, and then it radiates that back into space. And if everything that comes in is the same with everything that goes back out again, the world is in balance, and the temperature on Earth here won't change. But if the energy or heat that comes in isn't the same as what goes out, if some of it is trapped, then we are unbalanced, and that is when we start to warm. So why is the world warming? What is trapping that heat? Some people say, hasn't the world been hotter than this before? Isn't it just a natural cycle?
This example is only one of the many possibilities that we have, because there are so many topics and so many ways to address them. I'll give you a second example coming from Germany. The Content Alliance, which unites the force of print media, television media, and digital media, is creating sustainability weeks every quarter, where you can see on all channels, in all magazines and all digital platforms, articles, programs, and contents tackling a specific aspect of sustainability. The past topics that were treated were food wastage, for example, smart mobility, and also health. And they are rolling out with more and more topics to educate the wider audience. But sustainability in the media is not only about the content and what information we are giving. It's also about how we are producing and distributing the content. And as video media is shifting more and more towards digital video, we have a real concern regarding the digital pollution, because at the moment, 80% of the internet traffic is made by video, and video is contributing heavily to global warming. So what are the broadcasters doing at the moment? They take their online video platforms and they work with scientists and consulting firms to try to calculate the carbon footprint of their online video platform and optimizing them to reduce to the maximum the carbon emissions of the online video platforms. But let's get back to our consumers. Is the consumer behavior changing, and how is it affecting the brands? That's what we're going to see in the second part of the survey. In general, again, if you ask the European consumers in every country that we surveyed if they are taking a lot of actions to behave more sustainably, the vast majority of the consumer will say yes. It's more than 80% of European consumers that declare taking a lot of actions to tackle the climate change and the ecological challenge. But again, we decided to dig deeper into the concern. We identified 38 different sustainable actions in 4 different sectors: food, fashion, beauty and hygiene, transport and tourism. And we asked the question to all of respondents, which ones are you actually taking? And this is where some discrepancies start to rise between our different respondents. Let's start with the food sector. Food is responsible for 18% of our carbon emissions. So it's a major concern. It's a major habit that we have to shift when we want to be more sustainable. And we ask a couple of questions. And as you see on the infographic, the actions people are taking the most are buying seasonal products, preferring nationally produced food products, but also locally produced directly to the farmers. And here we can do an extra level of deep dive to see how are the different age categories behaving regarding food. And here's the first surprise. You remember that the younger generation was more aware about sustainability than the older generation. But if you look at the food behavior, it's the opposite. The older generation is more likely to buy seasonal products and local food than their younger counterparts. Still talking about food, there is a major concern in the food habit. It's how much meat are we consuming? Because we found out in our survey that 37% of the Europeans were likely to consume less meat, but they didn't know how to do it. They were not finding the right alternative to replace the meat. And in the advertising sector in Europe, we see an ongoing growing number of brands that are advertising for meat replacement. For example, Corn, coming from the UK, is making meat out of mycoprotein, so out of mushrooms. And a German company, very traditional one, that was making sausages for decades, called Rügenwalder Mule, is now producing essentially vegan meat. And the vegan segment of their offering grew by 70% in sales in 2020. So there's a real shift and a real market opportunity for these meat replacement products. Finally, another topic in food is not only the product, but also the packaging that is around. And there's a real concern about the packaging. For every generation, people want to use less plastic, less disposable packaging, and more reusable packaging. And in advertising, that's a topic that is widely addressed by the retailers. IKEA, for example, they developed a European-wide campaign for reusable packaging, and Tesco in the UK is widely advertising on how they recycle their own packaging in their stores. Let's jump to the next topic, which was mobility. And here the pattern is totally different than the food pattern. You see that the younger generation is looking for more and more alternatives to the personal car. So they are using more public transport, they are using more car sharing or carpooling options, but they are also increasingly using bikes. And this is one learning from the Corona times. The bike traffic increased like crazy. In Germany, it quadrupled in 2020. And we see more and more new bike companies coming on television to advertise, either for electrical bike products or bike rental products for business, so B2B. Looking at tourism and travel, we also see the pattern of the older generation being more responsible, especially because the older ones are more likely to go on holidays in their home countries, and they are favoring some ecotourism activity, while limiting the plane flights and picking travel destinations that respect the environment is a concern for everyone. And so the major tourist destinations, like amusement park, for example, are tackling the matter with some initiatives to becoming carbon neutral. That's the case of a park in Spain called PortAventura, which is now the first sustainable park in Europe. Let's jump to another very controversial sector when it comes to sustainability. It's the fashion sector. Because of fast fashion, the sector has been super criticized and is under close scrutiny. And here we checked some popular actions, and there's a very noticeable difference between the younger generation and the older generation, is that the younger ones are much more likely to buy and sell second-hand clothes. And this is a real opportunity in the market for brands, because we see some pure players emerging in the second-hand clothes by proposing some platforms. Vinted in Europe, for example, is one major actor, but we also have Vestiaire Collective, and also the traditional e-commerce retailer for fashion, such as Zalando, who's leader in Europe, are now proposing some second-hand options within their global offering. So that's an increasing trend in the fashion sector. Finally, if we jump to the beauty sector, our last sector, it's pretty similar as for the food sector. The consumers, whether they are older or younger, are all focusing on organic ingredients, natural ingredients, and nationally produced ingredients. People want to know what's in their beauty products and are going towards more and more natural offering. So what does it mean for brands? And that's the third part of our presentation, how to advertise towards these more and more conscious consumers that expect more and more sustainability for brands. Let's go back last year in the midst of COVID in March, April 2020. All the advertisers, all the major institutes in Europe and across the world ran big studies to help advertisers reshape their strategy. And they asked to a lot of consumers, what are you expecting from brands right now? And of course, there was a huge focus on the pandemic, on the crisis. A lot of consumers said, yeah, I want brands to help me deal with the crisis. But there were also some longer term concerns of consumers saying, yeah, I want brands to tackle what's coming after the pandemic. I want them to tackle sustainability. I want them to tackle societal change. And we see that as we are coming out of the pandemic, it's going to be a big matter for brands to tackle this topic. So we see that consumers have huge expectation towards brands in terms of sustainability, responsibility, and brands really make an effort in their communication. We asked the Cannes Lions, the great competition for creativity in advertising, and they told us that nearly 80% of the submissions of the case they had for the awards add sustainability or a responsibility element in it. And when we ask the brands in France, for example, 68% of the French brands declared they are taking into account sustainability and responsibility in their communications. But now it's time to see how it's reflected in the consumer perception. Well, there's a real gap in perception because 40% of the respondents we asked in Europe are not able to cite a single responsible brand. They don't know. If you ask them, give me the name of a responsible brand, 40% will say, I don't have a clue. And in every country, around 90% of them will say that it's not easy to determine whether or not a brand is acting sustainably. So how to deal with it, how to convey responsibility, sustainability in an advert. That's a very tricky topic. You have to identify a sweet spot between a greenwashing situation where you actually claim some responsibility that you're not taking and you expose your brand to serious risk if you're doing some greenwashing. And on the other side, some green blaming. You don't want to use communication codes that create anxiety and guilt to the consumer. So you want to be a bit in the sweet spot in the middle ground. You want to be real, say nobody is perfect when it comes to the environment. You want to be practical. Here's what you can do. Here what we can do to help. Be empathetic and also be local. Like environment, sustainability is not something in the North Pole. It's here and now. That's the way that you can address sustainability in advertising. Let's jump into super concrete case. The first one is to be very practical, very pragmatic. Do not claim anything that you can't prove. It's coming from Italy. La Rai, the public broadcaster in Italy, is doing a special TV advertising format called labeling lecture. So they will actually read out the components of a food or cosmetic products just to explain to the consumer, this is where the product is coming from. We are 100% transparent and this is real. And we see that the result in the perception is widely positive when brands take this practical and transparent approach. Let's see the video.
Oggi, a lezioni di etichetta, Mutti vi racconta perché la lattina della sua polpa di pomodoro è così speciale. È una vera e propria lattina litografata. Cosa significa? Che le informazioni sono tutte stampate direttamente sulla latta. Così, oltre a preservare tutto il gusto del pomodoro fresco, la lattina Mutti è facilmente smaltibile, interamente riciclabile e, perché no, con creatività e fantasia, anche riusabile. Hai mai visto una lattina così? Alla prossima lezione.
Our second option when it comes to use advertising for sustainable purpose is to use a part of the advertising budget to offset the campaign, to compensate and to invest into sustainability. In France, the French broadcaster M6 is proposing a system called Ad for Good, where 1% of the budget of the advertising campaign is going into sustainability products. And it's advertised on screen with a big layer around the ad that clearly shows to the consumers that by watching these ads, they are contributing actively to sustainability. There's also an agency coming from Germany called Media Plus, and they are currently rolling out with all of their clients across Europe a green offsetting program called the Green GRP. So they developed a calculator to measure how an advertising campaign is contributing to global warming and what's the carbon footprint of an advertising campaign, and they are offering advertisers to compensate these carbon emissions by investing, again, between 0.5% and 1% of extra budget in order to compensate for the carbon emissions of the campaign. And finally, when it comes to like sustainability expressed in a nice, local, empathetic way, what's better than a touch of British humor to convey the right message? This is what Korn did to advertise in the UK with a superb campaign called Saving the World One Bite at a Time. Let's see.
I've had meat and two veg every day of my life. I like meat and two veg.
This recipe was handed down to me by my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. It's never changed.
I literally eat my competitors for breakfast.
I love a bit of mammoth.
I'm generally a meat guy, but
These corn fillets are well tasty. Plus, eating them could help save the planet in 40,000 years' time.
I've just swapped the meat out for corn.
And I'm having a corn tacker, and it's great!
Beefcakes don't need beef.
I'm having corn and two veg instead.
and I'm going veggie for the kids. Ha!
Fair play, lad. Fair play.
Help lower your carbon footprint by switching to Quorn. Helping the planet one bite at a time.
So finally, what have we seen? First of all, we've seen that the consumers, they expect the media to educate them and to raise the awareness when it comes to sustainability, carbon footprint, and global warming. Second, we see that the consumption habits are really changing. People are taking new habits to limit climate change, and they expect brands to offer them solutions, products, ideas to help them deal with the global warming. And finally, we see that advertising about sustainability for a brand is not an easy thing. The perception gap is huge, and you really have to tackle the right approach in order to convey the right message and not being accused of greenwashing or, on the opposite, green blaming. So be pragmatic, take some humor, or come with concrete solutions to offset your advertising campaign. Thank you very much.